Welcome to Racing Green, live from Earthfest 2024. Today our guest host, Elizabeth Corse, chats with Julia Pallé, Vice President of Sustainability for Formula E. This conversation explores how sustainability and technology are being tightly integrated into motorsports and the positive impact Formula E has on the communities it races in.
Hey, welcome to Earthfest. Are you having a good time? Woo! Welcome to the Racing Green Live edition. We're so excited today to be joined by a real-life audience. I am delighted and thrilled to be your host today. My name is Elizabeth Corse. And today we're talking more motorsports and potentially the paradox between motorsports and sustainability. So the guest that I am with today believes that sustainability isn't just a concept, but a must-have, especially in the fast-paced world of motorsports. And she is well placed to know, as she is responsible for sustainability in the fastest growing sport in motorsports, which is Formula E. She has spent a decade integrating sustainability into every element and facet of Formula E, really setting a global standard for what good looks like. And so here to help us, wait for it, dive into how technology can drive excitement for sustainability in sports and beyond, please welcome Julia Pallé, the Vice President of Sustainability of Formula E.
Thank you.
Now, we're very lucky to have Julia because we're still in the middle of the season, and it just so happens that we don't have an E-Prix this weekend. And of course, I can't think of a more appropriate guest for the Racing Green podcast. I mean, this is what this podcast was made for.
That's what we're all about. So.
Absolutely. So I guess before we find out a little bit more about Formula E, I think there is the elephant in the room, which is, can sustainability in motorsports really be a thing? Or is it just a paradox?
So, I mean, that's what we discussed the first time we met. And I mean, my theory, because this is my entire career, is that absolutely. So, I mean, you can absolutely, and that's what Formula E is showcasing on the day-to-day, make sure that you can offer, a show that is fantastic, motorsport that is the most, unpredictable and exciting as it can get, with making sure that your events are as sustainable as they can get. And that's what Formula E has been all about since day zero. We are celebrating the 10th season of Formula E, but also, I mean, making sure that it's a race with no finish line to make sure that, you're making sure that everything that you do is going to be thought through the lens of sustainability. And sustainability, obviously, I'm simplifying because it's a complex concept. You have environmental, social, and economic aspects. But there's a way when basically your organization has been funded with the purpose of sustainability, then it proves that you can actually, resolve the paradox and make it a powerful concept with no compromise.
No compromise. I mean, that is a powerful statement right there. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you yourself ended up, first of all, in motorsports, sustainability, which came first, the chicken or the egg. Tell us how you ended up being in this particular situation.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's actually interesting because I ended up working in motorsport without really thinking about it. I had always enjoyed cars, racing, and so on, but as a hobby, the person that watches that on the TV on the Saturday or Sunday afternoon. When I did my study, I first qualified as a sustainability expert. And I had hints, let's say. I wanted to work in an industrial environment because I knew, so I liked the idea of paradox already. I knew there were, a lot of emissions in industries, but you had a lot of opportunities. So I ended up by chance working, finding my first job opportunity in motorsport because I worked in the tire industries. I worked for Michelin, which is the French tire manufacturers, and they do have a motorsport division. And they were looking for someone to be at the intersection of the group sustainability department and the specificities that are required by motorsport. And that's how I started. And I very quickly realized a couple of things. First of all, no one at that time, almost 15 years ago, was doing sustainability in motorsport. So I was like, there's untapped opportunities there. Even less, there were women. I was really one of the few females in the paddock at the time. My first race actually was in Silverstone. I will never forget it. And I'm not joking. I was probably one of the only females in the paddock. And that's sad to think that just 15 years ago, that was the case. And then that's basically, I had a wonderful avenue in front of me if I wanted to pursue, like the two. So being a female in motorsport, advancing sustainability. And believe me, sometimes at the start, it was not easy because people were absolutely seeing the paradox and were not really seeing how you could actually solve it. But I mean, now you look at it and Formula E completely disrupted the status quo of what motorsports and sustainability look like. It's a much, I think it's a much nicer perspective for the rest of the industry and also for young people that are motivated about sustainability and want to embrace motorsport.
Yeah, and that they can actually embrace a sport in a way that they might have felt potentially slightly conflicted about supporting.
There's no guilt to have, only pleasure.
So as we said, Formula E is in its 10th season, and that is an achievement in itself, right? Because there was no guarantee that there was going to be uptake, let alone it being growing as fast as it has. Can we just understand the difference? So, everybody knows about Formula One. I have been really interested to hear about Extreme E and then Formula E. And can you just untangle how they link together and how they might be also separate?
Yeah. So Formula E is obviously an all-electric racing series. If we want to go a bit technical, it's single-seater. So there's only one human being that can sit in this car, contrary to the cars that we drive. So from this instance, you could find the similarities with Formula One, but that's where it stops, because obviously we're battery electric vehicle powered, 100% from renewable energy. We race in the heart of cities, because that's where obviously you have the maximum benefits and opportunities of electric vehicles. We race on temporary tracks most of the time, because it's part of the concept to, bring the event to the public. It's like the circus. We travel around the world, we build the show, we dismantle the show, and then you forget where we've been, except we leave a positive impact behind for the local community. But I'm sure we will come back to that. And in essence, our mission from the start was seeing that there was obviously the big problem of climate change coming. And from the motorsport perspective, obviously we have strong links with the mobility and automotive industry. And automotive represents a third of the global emissions, CO2 emissions. So it's not a small role that there is there. And so in essence, if you switch to electric vehicles and they're powered by renewable energy, you can radically cut down those emissions. So we needed to advance the technology around electric vehicles. And motorsport is always a fantastic laboratory to do that, because it's basically a sort of like sandbox for the different brands to develop technologies, test them in very demanding environments, and then make sure that they can transfer those technologies. Some of the manufacturers that are with us have said that long-term innovation transfer in Formula E is only 4 years. So if you think about the curve of innovation, it's nothing, 4 years for the highest level of technology that is developed in the garages. And then the other beauty of motorsport is that you're a fantastic platform to inspire people, because you're mesmerized by the sport. And so you get basically the message in terms of the lifestyles that people can live. And so we're basically trying to play on both. We've always had a roadmap where we were trying to solve the technological issues that us consumers would be facing in the next 5 years from the EV perspective, and then pushing the sport and using this appeal to inspire people to drive electric and live more sustainable lifestyles in general.
So we think of EV cars on the road, we think range anxiety, right? So is that what you're saying? Is that in pushing forward that innovation, what are some of the examples you've seen of that transfer within 4 years?
Yeah, so I actually think you still maybe think about range anxiety, but you think also about infrastructure. So we'll come back to that, but I'll answer to your question. So my favorite example is Jaguar. Jaguar has been racing with us since almost the very first season. And Jaguar, obviously, maybe everyone knows the I-Pace SUV that they have. And so after a couple of seasons, they managed to develop a software that they were using in the racing car. They used in their I-Pace. So overnight, they implemented a software update that gave 10% battery life extra to all the users in the world. So we're not talking, like a small impact, like thousands of people overnight got the software update that was coming from the technology of the Formula E Championship. So that's one of the examples. Nissan, that has been racing with us since day one. You think about Nissan Leaf 15 years ago. Well, first of all, they had the merit of having an electric vehicle, but obviously in terms of performance, even in terms of look and feel, it was not necessarily the most appealing car. And now the range, I think, has been increased by over 150%. And also, the range, the look and feel, and, like the emotions that the car is giving is completely different.
And to come back with what role do you think Formula E has on maybe pushing greater awareness in Formula One? And where does Extreme E come? And how is that slightly different? Because that's not your remit, but is there that link between them?
So I think, our role is to showcase that, there's a different, technology on the streets that is perfect, especially in the heart of cities, to use, to look at mobility in a sustainable way. The intent when we created Formula E was to be very different from any kind of other racing series, including very different to F1, because we were designed with basically this aim to accelerate EV technology, but also to make a sport that was radically different, thought through the lens of accessibility, affordable, or tickets to come and basically be in our fan village or just couple of tens of pounds, euros, dollars, wherever we are in the world, but that's not much more than that. We've designed the event to make sure that the fans can get closer to the racing teams. The podium is actually in the fan village. The fans basically can get as close as the back of the garages. So our role is to basically provide a very different solution to showcase that motorsports is actually something that can be close to people's life, but also that motorsport is actually something that can impact positively their lives through the technology that is being developed and transferred into the road cars that you and I are driving tomorrow. Now, Extreme E is the sister organization of Formula E, so it's different entities, but same founder. I call our founder a serial entrepreneur in electric business. He's created Formula E, Extreme E, that is all-electric SUVs racing in remote corners of the world impacted by climate change. So we race in places that unfortunately have been damaged already, and we showcase this impact. And he's also recently created an all-electric boat racing championship called E1. I'm grateful and lucky to be working also across the three series, at least just high level to advise and make sure that we create synergies between the three. So those two sister organizations are here to basically keep advancing, all electric segments that are possible in terms of, the industries where we know that there needs to have a push. So, the SUV segment was created because SUVs are historically the most demanded type of car by consumers. The most polluting type, because they are the heaviest by default, and also the most profitable segment of cars from the OEM perspective, the car manufacturers. So it was really worth basically doing a focus on them and making sure that we would have, a specific look at how do we advance all the technologies around Extreme E. Actually, what is fantastic is that Extreme E is now transitioning to become hydrogen powered. So it's again a new and interesting technology that is arising. Whereas E1 is all about boats and making sure that we support the maritime industry in the transition to electric powered boats, because again, we all know that those huge ships emit so much CO2. We need to do something about it, and they are quite late in terms of the innovation roadmap where they in comparison to where they should be.
Where they need to be and where we need to get to in the time that we have to make the impact. So it's really helpful to understand, first of all, that there is this ecosystem approach. Now, obviously, with motorsports, it is synonymous with innovation. It is synonymous with technology. But you also talk about the behavior change, right? Which is, okay, well, everybody is demanding SUVs, but where is that role? Now, obviously, Formula E does its thing. Where have you seen an opportunity, kind of as Formula E, to leverage that circle of influence? You've talked about the fans, you talk about the teams. I guess there's also a piece of work around advocacy. We've seen here in the UK maybe a slight retrenchment on EV technology. Is this something we should be worried about? And can something like this sport galvanize sports fans to demand it back, if that makes sense? Not for climate reasons, but because of entertainment reasons or whatever. So,
yeah, so I think it's interesting because a lot of people are saying in Europe that it's slowing down. And actually, we were a couple of weeks ago in Japan, and we work regularly with Bloomberg, and Bloomberg has this amazing EV outlook perspective and report that is a global outlook. And so, their point was, so it's not me saying it as Bloomberg, so then you take it, as it is. Bloomberg is saying, yes, in some of the countries in Europe, it's slowing down. However, if you look globally, it's absolutely not slowing down. It's actually increasing because the Asian market are going crazy with electrification. So I think what we're seeing is just obviously a slowdown rather than a decrease, because our markets are probably starting to reach a certain growth is not always a sort of linear phase. You've got some plateaus and then you restart and so on, because at the moment, and we will come back to that, I think what is happening in our markets is we need the infrastructure to advance. So we'll come back to that. Yeah. But in Asia, it's the other way around. They're in the full phase of adoption. And this is basically making that the global market is booming anyways. So it's interesting to see, the world is, it depends on the focus that you take to look at it. But if we go to infrastructure, because it's the second time I mention it, so I'll just speed this out in a sense. Infrastructure is very important because I think the range anxiety is probably a worry from the past now, because you've got vehicles that can go up to 500, 600 kilometers without needed to be recharged. Now, what is the problem is that, I want to go on holidays and I'm going to drive more than 500 or 600 kilometers. What do I do? Because I'm scared I'm not going to find an EV charger. If I find it, is it going to be, 5 hours of wait for me and my family before we finally reach the place that we want to go on holidays? And so one of the things that we always make sure that we use our championship from the technological roadmap that we have is that we try and always anticipate those things that are going to be becoming a problem from the consumer point of view and solve them in the let's say the small environment of the series. We test them, we solve them, and then we make sure that it can be rolled out. And that's what we're going to do from next season onwards, hopefully. It's implement ultra-fast charging solutions in the context of the races, where we showcase to the public that ultra-fast chargers, so in a couple of tenths of seconds, can recharge, 10+% of the batteries, tenths of seconds. So it's and that's it. So it's powerful for us to showcase that. This technology is, is there out there in the market. Obviously, it needs to be rolled out as a mass market solution. But I think this is what, will re-stimulate the markets like the European market to unlock this plateau phase and restart the increase.
And do they have range anxiety in Asia, or have they solved that?
Well, we've not been really seeing much range anxiety. Again, the Asian market is also dominated by a lot of huge cities, where in the end you don't end up doing many, many kilometers. So it's just such a practical example for them of a car that is potentially, very efficient, gets you where you need to be, and then, you charge it overnight and that's it.
And so I guess this idea of fan engagement, what does Formula E, I don't know what the kind of audience makeup is, do you have fans of F1 also dabble in Formula E? Is it an entirely new audience? And how are you able, or can you capture the excitement that comes out of seeing this technology unfolding as quickly as it's unfolding?
Yeah, so we have basically three main drivers to the series in terms of the topics: the technology and the innovation, the sport itself. If you're a sports enthusiast, you're going to be likely interested, and then sustainability, and then basically the profile of the people that joined for the sport. It's general sports minded people. Obviously, you have motorsport fans, but we actually span very broadly across fans that are interested in sport in general. So that's actually interesting because we go quite wide and far. From the sustainability point of view, what we see is that our fans are categorized in between those that are in the range of the 30 to 40 years old, Typically, adults with young children that are worried about the future of their children and are wanting to support, like a sport that is going to be creating positive impact for their children. Or you have very, very young, adults, if not like still, teenage, like 18, 20 years old, that are really into the sport for the social impact that we can create. Very female dominated, which is wonderful. And then you've got basically, all this range of young people that are motivated and intrigued by the technology and the innovations.
So let's actually look a little bit about the impacts, because of course sustainability is not just about the environment and emissions. It is about the legacy that you leave behind, and just this idea, we've all got this in mind now, of Formula E, a bit like your circus coming to town. You go back, but you leave the positive impact. Paint for us a picture. What types of impact, both on the social and the environmental side, and then maybe where the impacts are, because of course you've taken away the combustion engine, but you're still logistically moving around the world. So, let's talk about the impacts, where the impacts are, and how are you solving or leaving positive impact behind?
Yeah, so, we measure everything. We were the first sport in the world to achieve net zero carbon since inception, which means that there's been a huge process of measurement and understanding of the carbon footprint. And so, in essence, 70 to 75% of the carbon footprint of the series is due to the freight that we travel around the world. So this traveling circus that we take from last week last week Misano, the week before Tokyo, next week Monaco, and so on. So, but what is really interesting is in all of that, we've been working since day one with, our partner DHL to make sure that we are actually doing something about it. But again, we'll come back to that. So in essence, the impact is this one, the fact that we travel around the world. But what we do to actually have remedies on that is that we're aligned onto a protocol that is called the science-based targets. And science-based target is basically a way for any entity in the world to try and operate in a way that is sustainable for the planet, literally. So trying to make sure that your level of emissions and operations is going to be in line with what the world can sustain. So the famous 1.5 maximum degree Celsius of increase that the world is trying desperately to stay under, which is a challenge. But our organization has decided to make sure that we would operate under this threshold. And so we continually have to reduce our CO2 emissions in line with that. And the good news is that that's what we do. And we have basically, a couple of different leverages to do that. First of all, the energy that we use, not only to power the cars, but also to power the rest of the events. And basically that's using renewable sources. So, either we plug onto the grids of the countries where we race and we make sure that it comes from renewable sources, or to power our cars, we have different solutions. Sometimes we've got battery energy storage systems. That's the case for the races in Europe. And so this battery energy storage comes fully charged with, renewable energy, solar or wind that comes from the country where we race. And then it charges all the cars when we need it for the race. If not, we use basically generators and biofuel. That it's a very specific biofuel because it's waste cooking oils that are transformed in the same chemical product as diesel, but obviously it's a waste, and it's a waste that is transformed into a new material. So it's called second type generation. And so that's, the only biofuel that is accepted as renewable energy. And so that powers the cars when we cannot use something else. And so that's one leverage. And the other one is, the logistics. And so logistics, what we've done is that we've tried and organize our calendar in a more clustered way. So as I said, we are just back from Asia. Now we do the round of European races, Italy last week, Monaco this week, then Berlin and so on. And so, that makes obviously that you travel less. And when we travel, we try and avoid as much as possible plane. And we maximize the use of road and sea freight because those are also on biofuels that are renewables. So that's the approach, but it's a constant, quest and challenge. And we call that the Project X because it's, we're the fastest growing sport. So, growth means, expanding, but I need to do that by being always more efficient. And, we've got our latest sustainability report that is actually going to be published on Monday. And one of the key headline is that, we've been able to be 41% more efficient in season 9 in comparison to season 5. So, we're just talking talking just a couple of years apart to deliver one race. So a race is 41% more efficient today than it used to be back in season 5 for us. So yeah,
and this is where measurement is so important. It's not necessarily the place where you win hearts and minds,
no,
but it is the place that future you, i.e., where you are today, can tell that story and really show that positive signal. So there's a couple of things I want to get back to, specifically around the role of technology, because of course you are going to be focused on technology more than, say, the behavior change aspect of it. Now, when we think about battery electric vehicles, we know we need, and it's a big criticism of EV cars, is that whilst they might not contribute as much CO2 emission, the impacts on social, the need for rare earth materials, and one of the biggest issues of our time now that we face is deep sea mining. This is something that is starting to really rear its head. And I'd love to understand, does Formula E have a role to play in advocating for or against that type of initiative? Or are you just really focused on, we'll bring the technology solutions and then that is kind of beyond our remit?
No, I mean, we absolutely, take responsibility and accountability in these when it's under our scope and control, which means all cars and all batteries. So, the car that we currently drive, because we have different iterations of our racing car. So every 4 years, we actually completely redesign and rethink our racing cars because we need to be at the latest and cutting edge of technology. So we are currently in the phase 3. So this is generation 3 of our racing car. And when we designed generation 3, we actually made mandatory in the tender the fact that, first of all, we don't use any kind of rare earth minerals in our batteries. So, this is something that is important for us. And I think that showcases that you can have performance without those rare earth minerals. 2, we made sure that in terms of the supplies, we would put as a mandatory element of the contract with our supplier, the fact that, we wanted only grade A supply chain for the minerals that are coming in the battery, especially lithium. These are lithium-ion based batteries. And so the lithium, in terms of sourcing, means that the grade A is sourced in places where the communities have not been negatively impacted, and also has been done in the most environmentally, I can't say it, friendly way. So this is super important for us, and we're not shying away from that. This is something that we are talking about. And also, I think the fact that, all the technology and development that we're seeing in the battery world, which is fascinating, we're, for example, starting to question ourselves on, will we switch to solid-state batteries? Because we might not need lithium-ion anymore to get, the racing cars powered. That's absolutely something that is, a possibility. And you're starting to look at complete different technologies and kind of minerals that you probably would find in the soil and in the ground here in the UK. So these are fantastic opportunities that we're really always staying connected with, to make sure that we find something that is truly sustainable, not just okay, let's find a technology, but it's going to cost, Earth and society basically an arm and a leg. That's not working. It's not sustainable.
And it is what makes sustainability so exhausting, isn't it? Because
it's endless.
It is the race.
Yes.
It is the race that literally has no finish line. And I think that's maybe a phrase I might be stealing from today.
Please.
I suppose one of the things that would be really interesting to understand is what conversations are happening at the boardroom level. Obviously, you've been set up with sustainability at the very core, but like everybody else, you are going to be facing the real life challenges. Interested to understand if your races are being impacted by climate change. There's often, especially in some territories like the UK, it's easy to think, well, climate change is happening over there, but it's not happening over here. So are you having real life impacts on your own races? And how close or distant is, what I would call real life sustainability impacting the boardroom?
Yeah. So, we actually end up racing in places that are definitely impacted by climate change. Last year, we had a race in Jakarta, and I'm sure that, some of you are aware that Jakarta is actually a capital that is sinking, literally. So, the Indonesian government decided to work with us to elevate the topic of sustainability because this is one of the biggest challenges and issues that they're facing. And so, getting this race in Jakarta, which is a city that will have to be displaced, literally, was a fantastic way for them to promote the fact that they were really committed to sustainability because this is a necessity. It's not even like a maybe. It's a necessity. It's a survival, existential question for the Indonesian government. So, we get to places where, we actually race to support this transition to a more sustainable lifestyle. We've also been racing in places. One of the, opener races of the season was in Sao Paulo. We had a total heat wave in Sao Paulo. The asphalt was actually melting when we were there. And again, basically what was being discussed in the media and with the governments, because we obviously have very strong ties in with the different governments, they have to let us close the streets and so on. So it's a big deal. Is the fact that, this was absolutely unprecedented. They are being impacted massively in their populations by climate change. And they do need to accelerate, the calendar around the transition to more sustainable policies, including in terms of transport, because what is fascinating and where we have a huge opportunity is that we're always at this intersection in between, businesses and governments, and we use our sport as a fantastic way to inspire because governments obviously have huge, let's say, challenges and commitments taken with United Nations in terms of, their own CO2 emission reduction in line, with the Paris protocols and so on and so forth. But if you're a government, you have absolutely no control on what your citizens are going to do. You can try and influence and support and inspire, but no one is going to force you to buy an electric vehicle if you think about mobility. So they use us as a way to inspire and to showcase to their citizens that, electrification is there and is, a real exciting alternative for them to drive, more sustainably on the day-to-day and have a lifestyle that is actually going to be more sustainable on the long term as such.
So have you found good ways of engaging with those fans? Like how, because that is such a hard message. And of course, you've got to keep it so simple. You can't go into read paragraph 3, section 5 of our manifesto. How do you live and carry that message in a way that can resonate with a local population?
Yeah, so, that's absolutely it. So, I think what we try and do is that for the fans that come to our event, we try and make sure that they have the experience that they enter a world that is, what the world should look like in 10 years, being, a sustainable version of it. So, they arrive by public transport. We never provide public parking to our fans. And that's part of the experience. I think it's, in London, it seems, it's the everyday for most of the people. But in some cities, it's not straightforward to take, the public transport to come to, a big event. So they arrive by public transport. Everything that they're going to be in touch with has been thought through the lenses of sustainability. So the event that they see is powered by renewable energy. And we make that quite clear to them when they come. Everything, is without plastic as much as possible. So we have, water fountains with reusable cups. You have waste recycling across all sites. The food that is being served is 30% vegan and vegetarian. You have sustainability, we call that champions, that hang out in our fan village to basically educate people. The day before, we have some community-related programs, so we engage with the local community because we recognize that we have also an impact when we come and we close the streets. And, for example, you're not going to be able to park where you're used to park for 15 days. Believe me, I'm French and people complain, so I understand that. But also, we sometimes we race super close to a school or a university or a local charity, and so we make sure that they are part of the event. They are, involved in the planning, thinking process, but also they have a behind-the-scene tour. They get to meet the teams and the drivers. That's obviously the coolest thing for them. But we also give them a sense of, what's the mission and, the purpose behind. And we work, to leave positive impacts. This is really, really important to us. One of the key programs that we have is a program that is, focusing on young girls. Because, if you remember my story 15 years ago, that I was the only one of the few females in the Silverstone paddock. I think it's no surprise to anyone that motorsport is a white, male, rich, dominated environment. not Formula E as such, but motorsport as a whole. And so we're really trying to bring the next generation of young and talented girls, whatever they want to be, but showcasing that, like, should you want to, as I was myself, like a young girl, I had never thought I could work in motorsport, yet I was interested in it. But we want to showcase that, there's a future for these girls should they want to. And normally the biggest barrier to entry is just having, like a foot in the environment, a sense of, like projection that you've seen actually a woman that works in this environment that has inspired you. And so we give them a full day before every single race this season of workshops on, like the basics of engineering, the basics of mechanics, the basics of journalism, and so on. They again get to meet the teams and the drivers, and they love it. They drive karts or they drive on our simulators, so that they're, the first steering wheel that they touch is actually an electric steering wheel. And I mean, at the end of the season, we'll have impacted 2,500 girls in different race markets. And I'm not lying. Genuinely, the first comment that comes back at the end of the day is, I had the best day of my life, and that's wonderful to hear.
And I guess this is where the beauty and the magic of bringing these things into the city centre, which is actually where so many people are living. And so you're really bringing it to their back door where people are, because they're either on social media or they're in,
yes.
A lot of them are on. So you've had you've got this wonderful foundation where you've had 10 years in Formula E. Maybe talk us through the kind of inflection points to this point. And then when you look forward to the next 10, obviously, crystal ball, we're not going to hold you to account. Yes. Save this recording and see if Julia was right.
Exactly.
But it would be great to get a sense of where you feel we can move to. If things go well, things go our way, and we mobilize enough people, what can it look like? So let's start looking behind, and we'll look into the future.
So I think the pivotal moment probably was when we really created a culture for sustainability within Formula E, because you would think that, like we were founded with the purpose of sustainability and it was done. It was absolutely not done. It took me probably 2 to 3 years to really get the business to a place where, I mean, it's one thing to have, like your purpose written down, but it's another thing to create a culture, because I really believe that culture is so much more powerful than strategy. The strategy will come from the culture, but creating that culture really, it takes time. We were a newly funded company, and we had these huge aspirations, but no one believed that we would even make it for the first race. After the first race, no one believed we would make it for the second race, and we almost died as a championship after a couple of races because we were broke, and we had to have investors that came in and so on. This is a fantastic, chaotic story, but in essence, so creating that culture for sustainability, where literally sustainability is embedded at every step of the way. And what was really the backbone of that was basically the implementation of, there's an international standard for sustainability in events. So, the ISO standards, there's one that is dedicated to sustainability in events. It's called ISO 221. And so basically almost the first day that we got started, we, worked on implementing that standards. And, it's not a tick box exercise. You create a process for your organization. And we really make sure that it would be the backbone of this business. And that's how we really managed to embed sustainability at every step of the way. So from sustainability in high strategic conversation, being in the room with commercial clients and discussions, to operationally looking at, it's very often the sustainability topic, bins, recycling, waste signage, and so on and so forth. So making that sustainability is a touch point at every step of the way, with the fact that everything basically goes up to what's the mission of the championship, which is to accelerate sustainable human progress. That's been really the inflection point.
Wow. And there will be lots of people either here in this room or listening to this podcast who are in your shoes, and they're at the point looking at this massive mountain of how on earth maybe it's just me, myself, and I, how do I, keep my sanity as I'm trying to bring about this change? And then looking to you, it sounds like you've really been able to flow that all the way down deep into that culture. So two things, I guess. The first is, where have you gone for support? How have you found the ability to carry on when maybe at the beginning there was a lot of pushback? And what are the things that you think are very important to get right when you're trying to embed it into culture?
So, I mean, always the first place to start is that you need to have leadership support. If you don't have the leadership support and buy-in, it's very hard to really make something that is going to be culturally, like impacting. And it's true that, I mean, when we funded Formula E, Alejandro Agag, the founder, this serial electric entrepreneur, had this vision. He funded Formula E for basically, like, he used to say, I mean, the world didn't need Formula E, planet did. So now it's aged a little bit, but I really still think it was a good tagline at the time, like for him to go back to showcase what he had in mind when he created Formula E. And so, I mean, the leadership buy-in is absolutely crucial. I mean, if you're wanting to implement change and sustainability meaningfully in an organization. And then where to start? I mean, we've started discussing the data. It's not the sexiest part of the job, but it's really crucial. I mean, you need to understand where your impact lies. And it's true both for the environmental and also the social. I mean, we discuss a lot with my team, like trying to have like very thorough and robust data in terms of the social impact that we create. It's very important. And that's really sometimes the basis. But strategically, you need to map out what your kind of key issues are. So most people say materiality assessment, call it the way you want, but you need to understand what are the most important issues that you have and turn them into the objectives that you're going to pursue. Be selective. It's a journey. I mean, they say Rome was not built in a day. It's the same for sustainability approach.
How big is your team today?
Today, my team is, substantial. I started on my own. Then we were 2 for a while. Now we're 6 full-time, plus half a dozen of consultants that support us on, real expertise topics that, we need, maybe not on the day-to-day, but on a monthly basis.
I think that story is a really important one to say, because behind every lonely sustainability lead or CSO, that vision that one day it's not going to just be you.
Yeah.
And so you just need to not get from A to Z. Well, we've just found out Z's never coming. So
Z plus.
Yeah. But the fact is that there is that direction of travel, and you've just got to get it to the point where you then get the next person. And of course, then decentralizing responsibility so that you can't be the person who is responsible for finding the sustainability issues in every aspect, because you can't see all of that.
But there's also something that is powerful is that, when you really embed in the organization this culture and, it starts being granular at every department level, then you train people. And so now we're in a place where it's actually the different departments that we've trained that are coming to us and be like, okay, I've got an idea. And I'm like, we don't have enough time, but go ahead.
Right. Well, that's where we're aiming for. That's where we're aiming for. So we unfortunately have to bring this conversation to a close. But I would love to ask you as a final question, when you're looking at the space that you are in, what gives you the most optimism in terms of where you can get to, what change you can bring forward?
Well, first of all, I'm an endless optimist. So it's going to be really positive, future for me in general, but also because I believe that, what human beings are great at is having ideas. And so innovation, technologies, and so on, I think is really the answer to most of our issues. We're able to make the best and the worst out of technology. That's a different conversation to have. But I really believe that technology is the way to help us make it to the challenge that is posed to us by climate change. And I'm really confident. I see so many amazing innovations and technology that are starting to rise up that I believe will get us to basically across the challenge of the 1.5 degrees or climate change as a whole. Because, yes, humanity is really great at, thinking through different ways that are going to get us there.
But in the meantime, you can bring excitement
absolutely
to the topic. And of course, that is the way we bring more people together and get them engaged in this conversation. So Unfortunately, that is all we have time for, but I do want to thank our audience for coming here today and sharing your precious time with us. I hope you leave with great ideas, inspiration, realizing that you're not on your own as you raise these topics within your own workplaces. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to our incredible guest for coming and sharing her ideas with us today. So a big round of applause to Julia.
Thank you. Thank you very much.